Captain Jake Morrison stood at the viewport of the UES horizon and watched the massive station that hung in space before them. Nexus Prime Station was bigger than any human city, and it gleamed with the strange lights of a dozen alien technologies. The station orbited a gas giant that swirled with colors that had no names in any human language. This was the heart of the Galactic Council, and Jake had been here many times before, but today felt different. Behind him, Admiral Lisa Carter reviewed the message they had received 3 days ago. The Council wanted to meet with all human representatives for what they called an important discussion about humanity's future in the galaxy. Jake knew that when the Council used words like important, it usually meant trouble for someone. And this time that someone was humanity. The docking bay of the station was filled with ships from across the galaxy. The crystalline vessels of the Vorthek caught light and threw it back in patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The energy ships of the Zilani looked like captured lightning held in bottles made of force fields. The dark metal hulls of the Krex Empire ships sat like sleeping predators waiting to strike. The geometric perfection of the Veltar collective vessels showed the hive mind's love of order and control. Even the strange flowing shapes of the synthesis ships were there, looking like liquid metal frozen in impossible forms. Jake had served in the human diplomatic corps for 15 years, and he had learned to read the signs. When all the major species gathered like this, it meant they had already decided something and were just going through the motions of telling everyone else about it. He had a bad feeling about what that decision might be. The humans had only been part of the Galactic Council for 50 years. Before that, they had been stuck on Earth and a few nearby systems, thinking they were alone in the universe. When the first alien ship had appeared over Earth in 2337, it had changed everything. The aliens had been surprised to find humans had developed faster than light travel on their own. Most species needed help from older civilizations to reach the stars, but humans had done it themselves. At first, the other species had welcomed humanity into the galactic community. They were curious about these newcomers who seemed to learn and adapt so quickly. Human colonies spread fast, and human technology improved at a rate that made some aliens nervous. Humans had a way of taking alien ideas and making them better, or finding completely new ways to use them. The horizon docked with the station, and Jake felt the slight vibration as the magnetic clamps engaged. He straightened his uniform and checked that his translation device was working properly. The council meeting would be conducted in the standard galactic trade language, but he wanted to be sure he could understand every word. Admiral Carter joined him at the airlock. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been humanity's chief representative to the Council for 10 years, and she knew how to deal with aliens better than anyone. Jake respected her, but he also knew she carried secrets that she had never shared with anyone. The interior of the station was designed to accommodate many different forms of life. The corridors were wide enough for the largest Krex and tall enough for the elongated Veltar. The atmosphere was a mix that most species could breathe, and the gravity was set to a level that would not crush the fragile or tire the strong. Lights of different colors marked paths for species with different types of vision. They made their way to the council chamber, following signs that appeared in holographic displays above their heads. Other diplomats and representatives filled the corridors, all moving in the same direction. Jake noticed that none of the other species' representatives looked at the humans or acknowledged them in any way. That was definitely not a good sign. The council chamber was a vast, spherical room with seating arranged in rings around a central platform. Each species had their own section designed for their particular needs. The Vorthak sat on crystal pedestals that amplified their natural light. The Zilani floated in energy containment fields. The Krex lounged on heated stone slabs. The Veltar stood in perfect formation like living statues. The synthesis representatives plugged directly into data ports in the walls. The human section was small and simple, with basic chairs and a small platform for their speakers. Jake and Admiral Carter took their seats and waited. The chamber filled slowly as representatives from hundreds of species took their places. Jake had always been impressed by the diversity of life in the galaxy, but today that diversity felt threatening. Elder Christarch Zekthal of the Vorthik rose from his crystal pedestal. His body was a living arrangement of geometric crystal formations that caught and reflected light in complex patterns. When he spoke, his words came through translation devices as a deep rumbling voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The elder began by talking about the long history of the galactic community and how important it was to maintain balance and order among the species. He spoke about the need for newer civilizations to learn from their elders and to accept guidance from those who had traveled the stars for millions of years. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he realized where this was heading. Then Zekthal turned his crystal attention toward the human section, and his tone changed. He spoke about humanity's rapid expansion and their hunger for new worlds. He talked about how humans had claimed more systems in 50 years than most species claimed in 500. He mentioned human military buildup and their tendency to modify alien technology in ways that other species found disturbing. The other council members began to speak in support of Zekthal's words. Representative Velanine of the collective spoke about human unpredictability and their resistance to proper order. War Commander Thakver of the Krex Empire complained about human defensive capabilities that made their worlds difficult to scout. Even the synthesis entity designated Prime 7 expressed concern about human technological adaptation rates. Finally, Zekthal delivered the Council's ultimatum. Humanity would cease all military expansion immediately. Half of all human colonies would be transferred to other species who could manage them more responsibly. Human research into advanced technologies would be supervised by Council observers. Any refusal to accept these terms would result in the complete removal of humanity from their current worlds. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the ultimatum settled over everyone present. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. Around the chamber, he could see representatives from other species watching the humans with expressions that ranged from satisfaction to pity. Admiral Carter stood slowly and walked to the human platform. She looked small and fragile, surrounded by the massive alien representatives, but her voice was clear and steady when she spoke. She thanked the Council for their consideration of humanity's place in the galaxy. She acknowledged their concerns about human expansion and growth. She spoke about humanity's desire to remain part of the galactic community and to continue learning from their elder species. Then she asked for 7 days to consider the Council's terms and to consult with the human government on Earth. It was a reasonable request, and the Council agreed, though Jake could hear amusement in some of the alien voices. They thought the humans were buying time to prepare for surrender. As the meeting ended, and the various species began to leave the chamber, Jake noticed that Admiral Carter had remained perfectly calm throughout the entire proceeding. She showed no signs of fear or anger or even surprise. It was as if she had been expecting this ultimatum all along. On the way back to their ship, Admiral Carter was quiet and thoughtful. Jake wanted to ask her what humanity's response would be, but something about her expression stopped him. She seemed to be calculating something in her mind, and he had the strange feeling that she was not as worried as she should be. As they reached the horizon, Admiral Carter went directly to the secure communications room. Jake heard her speaking to someone on a heavily encrypted channel, but he could only make out a few words. He heard her say something about Protocol Lazarus and something about awakening a fleet. Then she gave what sounded like an authorization code and ended the transmission. Jake had never heard of Protocol Lazarus, and he had no idea what fleet she was talking about. As far as he knew, the human military had decent defensive capabilities, but nothing that could stand against the combined might of the entire Galactic Council. But something in Admiral Carter's voice made him think that maybe humanity had secrets that even their own diplomatic corps did not know about. Dr. Alex Stone was 3 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean when his world changed forever. He had been studying what his colleagues called the deep formations for most of his career as a marine archaeologist. The formations were strange geometric shapes buried in the deepest trenches of Earth's oceans, and they had puzzled Scientists for decades, most researchers believe the formations were unusual geological features, created by volcanic activity or tectonic pressure. Alex had always suspected they were something else entirely. The shapes were too regular and too purposeful to be natural formations. They followed patterns that reminded him of engineering designs rather than random geological processes. He was examining a particularly large formation through the cameras of his deep-sea research vessel when the first tremor hit. The ocean floor shook with a vibration that registered on seismic sensors around the globe. Alex watched in amazement as sections of the formation began to separate and reveal hollow spaces beneath. Within hours, similar tremors were being reported. From every major ocean on Earth, the formations were moving and changing in ways that defied explanation. Antarctic research stations reported massive structures, breaking free from ice sheets that had covered them for thousands of years. Deep space monitoring stations detected objects in the outer solar system that had previously been cataloged as asteroids, but were now showing clear signs of artificial construction. Commander Kate Brooks received the emergency communication while she was overseeing routine operations at a facility that officially did not exist. Site Omega was buried beneath the Colorado Rockies, and its existence was known only to a handful of people in the highest levels of human government. Kate had been the facility commander for 5 years, but she had never seen anything like the readings that were now flooding her command center. Every monitor in the facility showed the same impossible data. Structures that had been dormant for longer than human civilization were coming online. Power signatures were appearing in locations around the globe where no power sources should exist. Most disturbing of all, the structures were responding to signals that matched no known human technology. Kate had been briefed about Protocol Lazarus when she took command of Site Omega, but she had always assumed it was theoretical contingency planning. The protocol outlined procedures for activating ancient defense systems that supposedly existed in hidden locations around Earth and throughout human space. She had thought it was the product of paranoid military planners who read too much science fiction. Now she was watching those theoretical defense systems wake up, and she realized that everything she thought she knew about human history was wrong. The first ship broke the surface of the Pacific Ocean near Alex's research vessel. It rose from the depths like a metal mountain emerging from the sea. Water cascaded from its hull in waterfalls that caught the sunlight and threw rainbows across the waves. The ship was massive beyond anything humans had ever built, and its design was completely unlike any human technology. Alex stared at the ship through his vessel's viewport and felt his understanding of reality crumble around him. The hull was made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols covered its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship's shape was organic and flowing, like it had been grown rather than constructed. Similar ships were emerging from oceans around the world. Antarctic researchers watched in awe as vessels larger than cities broke free from ice that had held them for millennia. Deep space observers tracked objects that had been drifting in the outer solar system for so long they had accumulated layers of cosmic dust and debris. Kate received confirmation that 67 ships had activated in Earth's solar system alone. Each ship was registering power outputs that exceeded anything in humanity's current arsenal. More disturbing still, the ships were attempting to establish communication links with human facilities using protocols that should not have existed. Dr. Alex Stone was among the first humans to make direct contact with one of the awakened ships. His research vessel had been investigating the Pacific emergence site when the massive ship sent a signal directly to his communications array. The signal was clearly artificial, but it used modulation patterns that were completely unknown to human science. When Alex responded with a standard scientific greeting, the ship's response nearly knocked him unconscious. Information flooded into his mind through channels he did not know he possessed. Images and sensations filled his awareness, and for a brief moment he saw the universe through eyes that were not his own. He saw Earth as it had been millions of years ago, when strange cities covered its surface and beings that looked almost human. but not quite human, walked among technologies that made current science look primitive. He saw fleets of ships like the one he was now facing traveling between stars that had not yet been born when human civilization began. Most shocking of all, he saw that these almost human beings were humanity's ancestors, and the ships were humanity's inheritance, waiting for the day when they would be needed again. The genetic locks that protected the ships systems were designed to respond only to human DNA, but not just any human DNA. The locks required specific genetic markers that were present in only a small percentage of the human population. Alex discovered that he carried these markers when the ship's computer systems began interfacing directly with his nervous system. Through the genetic interface, Alex learned that the ships contained vast databases of information about technologies and sciences that were far beyond current human understanding. The ships were powered by controlled singularities that generated more energy than most stars. Their weapons could disrupt the quantum structure of matter itself. Their defensive systems existed partially outside normal space-time. Kate Brooks was experiencing similar revelations at Site Omega as the facility's hidden systems came online. Chambers that had been sealed for decades opened to reveal technologies that should not have existed. Computer systems that had never been connected to any network began displaying information about stellar positions and galactic politics that dated back millions of years. The most disturbing discovery was that humans were not originally from Earth. The genetic data contained in the ship's computers showed that humanity's ancestors had come from somewhere else in the galaxy and had established Earth as one of many refuge worlds during some ancient catastrophe. Other humans around the world were experiencing similar genetic awakenings as they came into contact with the ships and their systems. Captain Morrison felt memories that were not his own flooding his consciousness as he stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon. Admiral Carter found herself understanding alien languages she had never learned and remembering diplomatic protocols from a civilization that had supposedly never existed. Awakening process was not random. The ship's computer systems were selectively activating humans who carried the proper genetic markers and who were positioned to make use of the information they were receiving. Military commanders found themselves understanding weapon systems and tactical doctrines. Scientists discovered knowledge of technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Diplomats remembered negotiation strategies that had been used to manage galactic civilizations. Dr. Stone learned the almost human ancestors who had built these ships had once ruled most of the known galaxy. They had not conquered through force but through technological superiority so complete that resistance was pointless. They had been teachers and guides to younger civilizations, helping them develop and grow while maintaining order and peace across thousands of star systems. The civilization had called itself the Terran hegemony, and it had lasted for over 10 million years. During that time, they had uplifted dozens of primitive species and helped them reach the stars. Many of the current members of the Galactic Council had been among those uplifted species, but something had gone wrong. The genetic memories were fragmented and unclear, but they spoke of a great catastrophe that had forced the hegemony to scatter and hide. The ships contained references to something called the Devour and Emergency Protocols for civilizational preservation. Kate discovered that Earth was just one of many worlds where the remnants of the hegemony had taken refuge. The humans who had settled on Earth had their memories suppressed, and their technology reduced to prevent them from attracting attention from whatever had destroyed their civilization. The massive ships had been hidden and set to activate only when humanity faced an existential threat. The Galactic Council's ultimatum had triggered the activation protocols. The ship's computer systems had interpreted the threat to remove humanity from their worlds as the kind of emergency that required the awakening of the ancient fleet. As more ships came online around Earth and throughout human space, it became clear that the fleet was enormous. Vessels that had been hidden on colony worlds disguised as natural features were revealing themselves. Ships that had been drifting in interstellar space for millions of years were changing course toward human systems. The genetic awakening was spreading among the human population as more people came into contact with the ships. and their technologies. Each awakened human gained access to memories and knowledge from humanity's forgotten past. Captain Jake Morrison stood in his quarters aboard the UES Horizon and tried to understand what was happening to his mind. The memories had started 3 days ago when Admiral Carter had returned from her secure communication session. At first, he had dismissed them as stress-induced dreams, but now he could no longer deny that he was remembering things that had never happened to him. He remembered standing on the bridge of a ship that dwarfed any vessel humanity had ever built. He remembered looking out at a star system where dozens of different species lived and worked together under human guidance. He remembered making decisions that affected the fate of entire civilizations, and he remembered doing so with a wisdom and authority that felt completely natural. The memories were not his own, but they felt real and immediate. He could recall conversations with alien beings whose species had not yet been born when human civilization began on Earth. He remembered technologies that violated every law of physics he had learned in school. Most disturbing of all, he remembered being someone else entirely, while still somehow being himself. Dr. Alex Stone was experiencing similar revelations as he worked with the awakened ship in the Pacific Ocean. The vessel had established a permanent connection with his nervous system, and through that connection he was accessing genetic memories that stretched back millions of years. Each memory was like a window into a past that had been hidden from human knowledge. He remembered the early days of the Terran hegemony, when humanity's ancestors had first ventured beyond their original star system. They had been different then, both physically and mentally. Taller and more graceful, with capabilities that modern humans had lost over millions of years of exile. They had possessed natural telepathic abilities that allowed them to communicate directly with other minds, and they had understood the universe in ways that transcended normal sensory perception. The hegemony had not begun as a conquest. Humanity's ancestors had encountered other species as they explored the galaxy and had found most of them to be primitive and struggling. Rather than exploit these younger civilizations, the ancient humans had chosen to help them develop and grow. Alex remembered the first contact with the beings that would become the Vorthek. They had been simple silicon-based organisms living in the crust of a volcanic world. They had possessed no consciousness as humans understood it, and no awareness of the larger universe beyond their underground caves. The ancient humans had spent centuries patiently teaching them to think and to dream until they became the crystalline beings that now dominated much of galactic politics. The process had been repeated with dozens of other species. The energy beings that became the Zilani had originally been random electromagnetic fluctuations in the atmosphere of a gas giant. Human scientists had discovered patterns in the fluctuations and had gradually helped them develop into coherent consciousness. The Kreks had been simple reptilian predators until human genetic engineering had enhanced their intelligence and given them the ability to build civilizations. Commander Kate Brooks was accessing similar memories through the systems at Site Omega. The facility was much more than a hidden military installation. It was a repository of human heritage that had been waiting for millions of years to be rediscovered. The computers contained complete historical records of the Terran hegemony, including detailed accounts of every species they had encountered. And uplifted, she learned that the hegemony had been based on principles that were completely different from any government system known to modern humans. It had not been a democracy or a monarchy or any other traditional form of rule. Instead, it had been a voluntary association of species that recognized human technological and philosophical superiority and chose to follow human guidance. Because doing so made their lives better, the humans had not demanded tribute or forced compliance. They had simply made it clear that cooperation with human goals would result in technological advancement and increased prosperity, while opposition would result in stagnation and isolation. Most species had chosen cooperation and had benefited enormously from human knowledge and assistance. The hegemony had lasted for over 10 million years, and during that time it had brought peace and prosperity to most of the known galaxy. Wars between species had become virtually impossible because human technology made resistance pointless. Poverty and disease had been eliminated through human medical and agricultural advances. Even death had become optional as human life extension. Technologies were shared with allied species. Jake found himself remembering the administrative systems that had managed this vast empire. The hegemony had operated through a network of human administrators who coordinated with local governments to ensure that each species' needs were met while maintaining overall galactic stability. The system had been remarkably efficient with most data governance handled by local species, while humans focused on long-term planning and technological development. The most remarkable aspect of the hegemony had been its approach to conflict resolution. When disputes arose between species or within species, the matter would be brought before human arbitrators who possessed both the technological power to enforce their decisions and the wisdom to craft solutions that satisfied all parties. The arbitrators had access to technologies that could analyze the emotional and psychological states of all involved parties, allowing them to craft solutions that addressed underlying needs rather than surface positions. Dr. Stone learned about the scientific achievements of the ancient hegemony through direct neural interface with the ship's computers. The technologies that modern humans considered advanced were primitive compared to what their ancestors had routinely used. The hegemony had possessed the ability to manipulate matter at the quantum level, allowing them to transmute elements and create materials with properties that seemed impossible. They had developed medicine that could regenerate entire organs and even transfer consciousness between bodies. Their agricultural systems could transform barren worlds into garden paradises within decades. Their manufacturing capabilities could build continent-sized structures in weeks, using automated systems that required no human oversight. Most impressive of all had been their mastery of space and time. The ships Jake was now remembering had not merely traveled faster than light, but had existed partially outside normal spacetime. They could appear instantaneously at any point in the galaxy, and their weapons could strike targets across interstellar distances without any travel time for the destructive force. The genetic memories revealed that humanity's ancestors had understood the universe as a multidimensional structure that could be manipulated through proper application of consciousness and technology. They had developed tools that allowed them to observe alternate timelines and to calculate the probable outcomes of their actions. Across millions of years of future development, Kate discovered that the hegemony had been planning for its own eventual downfall from the very beginning. The human administrators had understood that no empire could last forever, and they had built safeguards into their system to ensure that their knowledge and technology would survive. Even if their civilization was destroyed, the safeguards had taken the form of hidden colonies like Earth, where human populations would be placed with suppressed memories and reduced technology. These refuge worlds were designed to preserve human genetic heritage while keeping the population safe from whatever might threaten the main hegemony. The hidden fleets like the one now awakening had been positioned throughout the galaxy and programmed to activate when certain conditions were met. The activation triggers included threats to human survival and the discovery of specific technologies by younger civilizations that indicated they were ready to learn about their true heritage. Alex learned about the great catastrophe that had finally brought down the hegemony through memories that were fragmented and difficult to interpret. The enemy had been called the Devourer, and it had been unlike anything the humans had encountered before. It had not been a single species or civilization, but rather a force of pure destruction that consumed entire star systems and left nothing but empty space behind. The Devourer had appeared suddenly in a distant part of the galaxy and had begun expanding outward, consuming everything in its path. Human forces had been sent to investigate and contain the threat, but they had discovered that their most powerful weapons were useless against it. The Devourer seemed to exist outside normal physical laws, and it could not be destroyed by conventional means. As the Devourer had continued to expand, the hegemony had been forced to make an impossible choice. They could attempt to fight the entity with their full military might and risk exposing the entire galaxy to destruction, or they could sacrifice themselves to contain the threat and hope that future generations would find a way to permanently defeat it. The memories showed that humanity's ancestors had chosen sacrifice. They had used their most advanced technologies to create a containment field around the devourer that would hold it in place for millions of years. The process had required the complete destruction of the hegemony's infrastructure and the scattering of its population to refuge worlds throughout the galaxy. Jake remembered the final days of the great empire as human fleets. The seventh day arrived with a sight that no living being in the galaxy had witnessed for millions of years. Across human space and beyond, ancient ships emerged from their hiding places and took positions that demonstrated the true scope of humanity's heritage. What the Galactic Council had believed to be humanity's complete military capability was revealed to be nothing more than a few patrol boats compared to the armada that now assembled. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UES Horizon as the flagship of the awakened fleet approached Nexus Prime Station. The UTS Dominion was so massive that its gravitational field was measurable from thousands of kilometers away. The station's orbital mechanics had to be constantly adjusted to prevent it from being pulled toward the approaching dreadnought. The Dominion had emerged from the asteroid belt of Earth's solar system, where it had been drifting for so long that cosmic debris had accumulated on its hull in layers that told the story of millions of years. Now that debris was falling away as the ship's defensive fields activated and its true form was revealed. The vessel was over 50 kilometers long, and its hull was made of materials that absorbed electromagnetic radiation across all known spectrums. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the Dominion's command deck and felt the weight of genetic memories that stretched back to the foundation of the Terran hegemony. She was no longer just a human diplomat trying to negotiate humanity's survival. She was the inheritor of an authority that had once commanded the respect and obedience of half the galaxy. The awakening process had changed her both physically and mentally. Her body was stronger and more resilient than any baseline human, and her mind could process information at speeds that would have been impossible for her original neural structure. More importantly, she now possessed the accumulated wisdom and experience of hundreds of generations of human leaders who had managed galactic civilization around Nexus Prime Station. Other ships from the awakened fleet took positions that demonstrated their complete control of local space. The vessels varied in size and design, but all of them shared characteristics that marked them as products of the same advanced civilization. Their hulls seemed to bend light around them, making them difficult to track visually. Their energy signatures showed power outputs that exceeded the combined fleets of the Galactic Council. Dr. Alex Stone monitored the fleet's deployment from his position aboard the Pacific research ship that had become his mobile command center. The genetic interface with the ancient computers allowed him to observe the tactical situation from a perspective that transcended normal human senses. He could see the quantum distortions created by the ship's defensive systems and the gravitational anomalies generated by their exotic matter power cores. The Council species had been monitoring human space for signs of military buildup ever since delivering their ultimatum. Their sensors had detected some unusual activity, but nothing that suggested humanity possessed the capability to resist a combined Council fleet. The appearance of the ancient armada came as a complete shock to intelligence services that had believed they understood the full extent of human military power. Commander Kate Brooks coordinated the awakening from Site Omega, where banks of computers that had been dormant for millions of years were now operating at full capacity. The facility had revealed itself to be far more than a simple military command center. It was a hub of the ancient communication networks that had once connected the Terran hegemony across thousands of star systems. Through these networks, Kate could monitor the status of awakened ships throughout the galaxy. Vessels that had been hidden on human colony worlds were emerging from underground caverns and ocean depths. Ships that had been disguised as natural satellites were shedding their camouflage and revealing their true nature. Most remarkably, ancient vessels that had been drifting in interstellar space for so long they had been forgotten were changing course toward strategic positions. The scope of the fleet was beyond anything the current inhabitants of the galaxy had imagined possible. Thousands of ships ranging from small escort vessels to massive dreadnoughts like the Dominion were taking positions throughout known space. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering that combined technologies the Council species barely understood. Jake felt his understanding of military strategy expanding as genetic memories provided him with knowledge of tactics that had been developed over millions of years of galactic warfare. The positioning of the human fleet was not random but followed patterns that had been perfected during the height of the hegemony. Every ship was placed to maximize both offensive capability and defensive coverage while demonstrating overwhelming superiority to any potential opponents. The psychological impact of the fleet's appearance was as important as its military capability. The ancient ships moved with a precision and coordination that spoke of technological mastery beyond current galactic standards. Their very presence warped local spacetime in ways that caused sensor equipment throughout the region to malfunction. Most disturbing to the Council species was the fact that the ships' energy signatures matched theoretical models for technologies that were believed to be impossible to construct. Admiral Carter prepared for her return to Nexus Prime Station with a confidence that came from knowing she represented a civilization that had once been acknowledged as the galaxy's rightful rulers. The genetic awakening had provided her with detailed knowledge of each Council species, including their histories, psychological profiles, and the specific approaches that would be most effective in dealing with them. She knew that the Vorthek valued hierarchy and order above all else and would respond to clear demonstrations of superior authority. The Zilani respected ancient wisdom and would be impressed by evidence of humanity's true age and experience. The Kreks understood only strength and would submit to overwhelming force. The Veltar collective prized efficiency and would recognize the superior organization of human society. Even the artificial intelligences of the synthesis would be forced to acknowledge the technological supremacy represented by the awakened fleet. When the Dominion arrived at Nexus Prime Station, its presence dominated the local environment in ways that made normal station operations nearly impossible. The ship's mass was so great that it created tidal effects in the station's structure. Its energy output interfered with communication systems throughout the region. Most importantly, its weapon systems were so advanced that they could be detected by Council sensors even though they were not actively targeting anything. The Council had called an emergency session to address the sudden appearance of the human fleet. Representatives from all major species gathered in the Great Chamber, but the atmosphere was completely different from the meeting 7 days earlier. Where before they had been confident in their superiority, they were now faced with evidence that humanity possessed capabilities they had never suspected. Elder Christarch Zekthal of the Vorthek attempted to maintain his species' authority by demanding explanations for the human fleet's sudden appearance. His crystalline form flickered with patterns of light that indicated stress and confusion. The other Council members showed similar signs of distress as they struggled to understand how they had so completely misjudged human capabilities. Admiral Carter entered the Council chamber with an escort of human officers who had undergone the genetic awakening process. They moved with a confidence and authority that was unmistakably different from the uncertain diplomats who had attended the previous meeting. Each officer carried themselves like nobility, and their very presence seemed to change the dynamics of the chamber. When Carter reached the central platform, she did not request permission to speak as human representatives had always done before. Instead, she began talking with the natural authority of someone who was accustomed to being obeyed without question. Her voice carried clearly throughout the chamber, and her words were translated into the languages of all species present. She began by addressing each species by names they had not heard for millions of years. She called the Vorthak by their original designation as the Crystal Seekers and reminded them of their humble origins as simple mineral formations. She referred to the Zilani as the Lightning Dancers and spoke of the time when they had been random energy patterns without coherent thought. She named the Kreks as the Scale Crawlers and described their evolution from primitive reptilian predators. The effect of these revelations was immediate and profound. Every species in the chamber possessed Ancient legends about the first makers who had supposedly lifted them from primitivism to civilization. These legends had been dismissed as mythology by most modern scholars, but now they were faced with a human representative who spoke of these events as historical facts. Carter continued by recounting specific details of each species, uplift that could only have been known by someone who had been present during those ancient times. She described the genetic modifications that had enhanced Krek's intelligence and the energy manipulation techniques that had given the Zilani coherent consciousness. She spoke of the crystal growth processes that had allowed the Vorthak to develop their current form and the hive mind integration that had created the Veltar Collective. The transformation of galactic civilization began within hours of Admiral Carter's revelation to the Council. Word of humanity's true nature spread across the galaxy faster than light itself as species after species confirmed the ancient records and archaeological evidence that supported human claims. What had been dismissed as mythology for millions of years was suddenly revealed to be accurate historical documentation of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. Elder Christarch Zechthel was among the first to formally acknowledge humanity's authority. The proud Vorthak leader who had delivered the ultimatum just 7 days earlier now approached Admiral Carter with the crystalline equivalent of a bow. His light patterns displayed the deep respect that his species reserved for acknowledged superiors, and his words carried through the council chamber with appropriate humility. The Vorthak had always valued order and hierarchy above all other considerations. When faced with clear evidence of humanity's superior position in the galactic order, they adapted their worldview with remarkable speed. Zechthel formally requested that his species be allowed to resume their ancient role as humanity's allies, and expressed gratitude for the patient guidance their ancestors had received during their original uplift. Captain Jake Morrison watched the proceedings from the Dominion's command deck and marveled at how quickly the situation had reversed itself. The genetic memories provided him with understanding of similar moments in the ancient past when the Terran hegemony had revealed itself to younger civilizations. The pattern was always the same. Initial resistance followed by recognition followed by eager acceptance of human guidance. The psychological impact of the revelation extended far beyond the council chamber. Across the galaxy, ordinary members of each species were experiencing their own awakenings as racial memories suppressed for millions of years began to surface. The Zilani rediscovered meditation techniques that their ancestors had learned from human teachers. The Kreks began to recall honor codes that emphasized service to worthy leaders rather than simple dominance. Even the hive-minded Veltar started to remember concepts of individual worth that predated their collective consciousness. Dr. Alex Stone coordinated the release of technological information that would transform galactic civilization almost overnight. The awakened ships contained databases of scientific knowledge that covered millions of years of research and development. Medical techniques that could extend lifespans indefinitely were shared freely with species that had struggled with disease and aging. Agricultural systems that could transform barren worlds into gardens were made available to civilizations that had fought wars over habitable planets. The response was overwhelming. Within days of the first technology transfers, reports began arriving of miraculous healings and environmental restorations that seemed impossible by current galactic standards. Worlds that had been poisoned by industrial pollution were cleaned and restored to pristine condition using human atmospheric processors. Diseases that had plagued entire species for generations were eliminated using medical techniques that operated at the genetic level. Commander Kate Brooks supervised the establishment of the new governmental structure that would replace the Galactic Council. The system was based on the original hegemony model, but adapted for current galactic conditions. Rather than direct rule, humanity would provide guidance and coordination, while allowing each species to maintain their own internal governments and cultural traditions. The new organization was called the Galactic Commonwealth, and its foundational principles emphasized voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit. Species that chose to join would have access to human knowledge and technology that could advance their civilizations by thousands of years. Those that preferred to remain independent would be allowed to do so, but would not receive the benefits of Commonwealth membership. The response was immediate and decisive. Every major species requested admission to the Commonwealth within the first week of its announcement. Even proud civilizations that had never accepted outside authority recognized that the benefits of human guidance far outweighed any concerns about independence. The alternative was to watch other species advance beyond them. While they remained limited by current technology, Admiral Carter established her headquarters on a massive space station that was constructed using human manufacturing techniques that could assemble continent-sized structures in a matter of days. The station served as both the Commonwealth's administrative center and a symbol of humanity's restored technological supremacy. Its design incorporated elements from every member species' architecture while demonstrating capabilities that none of them could match independently. The integration process proceeded with remarkable smoothness, considering the scale of the changes involved. Human administrators worked alongside alien governments to implement new technologies and social systems that improved life for billions of beings. The approach was patient and careful, with changes introduced gradually to prevent cultural shock or social disruption. Jake found himself appointed as the Commonwealth's military coordinator with responsibility for converting the galaxy's various armed forces into a unified defense network. The genetic memories provided him with detailed knowledge of military organization and strategy that had been developed over millions of years of galactic management. The new military structure emphasized cooperation and mutual support rather than the territorial competition that had characterized previous galactic politics. The transformation was not limited to government and military affairs. Human educational techniques were introduced that could accelerate learning and improve cognitive function across all species. Cultural exchange programs allowed different civilizations to share knowledge and experiences in ways that had been impossible under the old council system. Most importantly, the elimination of resource scarcity through human technology removed the economic pressures that had driven most galactic conflicts. Dr. Stone established the Galactic Research Institute, where scientists from dozens of species worked together to explore the frontiers of knowledge, using tools and techniques that would have been pure fantasy just months earlier. The Institute's first major project was the development of technologies that could detect and counter threats like the ancient Devourer that had originally destroyed the Terran hegemony. The search for the Devourer itself became a priority for the Commonwealth's deep space exploration fleets. The ancient containment systems were located and found to be still functioning after millions of years, but showing signs of gradual deterioration. Human scientists worked with researchers from all member species to develop improved containment technologies and eventually a permanent solution to the cosmic threat. The economic transformation was perhaps the most dramatic aspect of the new Golden Age. Human manufacturing techniques could produce any desired material or product using basic atomic components. Scarcity became a concept from the past, as entire worlds could be reshaped to provide whatever their inhabitants needed. The energy requirements for such massive projects were met using controlled singularity generators that had powered the ancient hegemony. Captain Morrison led exploration fleets equipped with the most advanced sensors and communication equipment ever developed, as they mapped previously unknown regions of the galaxy and made contact with civilizations that had been isolated for millions of years. Each newly discovered species was offered the same choice that had been given to the Council. Members: join the Commonwealth and benefit from human guidance, or remain independent but without access to advanced technology. Commander Brooks supervised the establishment of educational centers throughout the galaxy where young beings from all species could learn together using human teaching methods that made knowledge acquisition both faster and more enjoyable. The centers became symbols of the new era, as children who would have been taught to fear and hate other species instead learned to work together toward common goals. The cultural renaissance that accompanied the political and technological transformation exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. Art forms that combined elements from dozens of different species created new types of beauty that none could have achieved alone. Music that incorporated the full range of galactic hearing abilities produced harmonies that transcended species boundaries. Literature and philosophy flourished as different ways of thinking combined to produce insights that advanced the understanding of all participants. The Commonwealth's success attracted attention from previously unknown civilizations in distant parts of the galaxy. Ancient species that had hidden themselves during the chaotic period following the hegemony's fall began to emerge from isolation and request contact with the renewed human leadership. Each contact brought new knowledge and capabilities that further enhanced the Commonwealth's ability to serve its members. Dr. Stone made perhaps the most significant discovery when his research revealed that the genetic memory systems that had preserved human heritage could be adapted to work with other species. This breakthrough allowed the Commonwealth's member civilizations to recover their own lost histories and reconnect with knowledge that had been forgotten during the Dark Ages, following the hegemony's collapse.